We're having a baby, Owen, and he's going to be a force of nature, just like you." That was the last thing I remember her saying before the note. 5 words scrawled on a blank check, the kind you get at the bank when you run out of the good ones. 5 words that changed everything. I have to find myself. That was it. Just her name underneath, no signature, no last words. Just the cold, hard reality of it. The check was blank, just like my mind, just like my life now. I had no idea that my dad abandoned me. A single dad with a newborn. But that wasn't the half of it. My father was about to finish the job. But you know what? It's not about them anymore. This story is for anyone who's ever been told they're not enough. For every person who had to build their own foundation after their family tore theirs down. If that's you, I want to see a fire emoji in the comments right now. Light it up. Tell me where you're watching from. Because I want to know we're in this together. And if you want to see how a man who had everything taken from him can build something better than he ever imagined, then hit that subscribe button. It's more than just a story. It's a blueprint. Just 2 weeks earlier, my world had been a canvas of vibrant possibility. Cora and I had just moved into a quiet little bungalow on the outskirts of town, a place with a sprawling yard and a porch swing that creaked just right. We'd spent weeks painting the nursery a soft, calming green. And I remember thinking it was the most perfect color in the world. Finn was due any day, and the air was thick with a kind of nervous excitement that made my chest feel like it was buzzing with 1,000 tiny bees. I had been so proud of the life we were building, proud of the home I was making with my own 2 hands. As a master carpenter, I'd built our furniture from salvaged wood, giving each piece a story, a history of its own. It was a metaphor, I told Cora, building something beautiful and new from what others had left behind. She'd just smile and squeeze my hand, her eyes shining with what I thought was love. I was a man with a plan. I had a wife I adored, a son on the way, and a life that felt 1,000,000 miles away from the cold, sterile world I'd grown up in. A world of expectations, not emotions. A world where my dad's approval was a currency you could never quite earn. But I should have known. You can't build something from nothing if the foundation is rotten. My phone buzzed in my pocket, and the number on the screen made my stomach drop. It was him. My dad. I hadn't even had the chance to call him yet. My throat tightened as I answered, the familiar, stern voice cutting through the silence of the empty house. "Owen," he said, his voice flat, devoid of any warmth. "We heard the news. We told you not to rush into this. Now you've made a fool of yourself. Don't come looking for help." The words hit me like a physical blow. The air rushed out of my lungs, and my hands, the hands that built our bed, our crib, my son's changing table, started to tremble. This wasn't just a slap. It was a final, damning judgment. It was a rejection not just of me, but of the life I had chosen, of the son I was about to raise. I had no idea that my dad abandoned me, a single dad with a newborn, and that was just the first wave of a storm that would change me forever. They were a family of engineers and accountants, of perfect projections and carefully calculated lives. My carpentry, my art, my whole existence was a deviation, an error in their perfect equation. I could almost hear the disappointment in his voice, the silent closing of a door I'd been trying to pry open my whole life. He hung up, the line going dead with a soft click that sounded like a final period at the end of a long, painful chapter. And there I was, standing in a beautiful, empty house I'd built with my own hands, holding a note and a blank check, with a newborn son sleeping soundly in the next room. My world had fallen apart, and I was left to pick up the pieces, alone, because my dad abandoned me, a single dad with a newborn, and I had to learn to stand on my own 2 feet, for the sake of the only person who needed me now. And just like that, the world went quiet. The line was dead. The house was dead silent, save for the soft gurgle of Finn sleeping in the next room. My phone felt like a stone in my hand. I didn't know then that this was just the beginning of a whole new kind of battle. I thought it was just about me and a newborn. I had no idea it was about a lifetime of being second best. I guess to understand the pain of that moment, you have to go back, way back, to a house on a cul-de-sac with a perfect lawn and a trophy case filled with my brother's victories. Caleb, my older brother, my parents' golden boy. He was a force of nature, charming, loud, brilliant at everything he touched. He was the prototype, and I was the follow-up model, the one with a few tweaks, but not quite as polished. I was the one who got B's when he got A's, the one who played guitar in the garage while he scored the winning touchdown. My parents, they didn't mean to be cruel. They just didn't notice. It was a kind of quiet neglect that's worse than yelling. It's an absence of presence. I remember one Christmas when I was about 10. I'd spent all my allowance and a few weeks of lunch money to get my dad a custom-made fishing lure. It was a simple thing, painted with a tiny, ridiculous fish I'd drawn myself. I was so proud of it. I wrapped it carefully and put it under the tree. When Dad opened it, he just stared for a second, then gave a tight, polite smile. "Oh, a lure. Thanks, Owen." He placed it on the side, and then turned to Caleb. Caleb had bought him a new high-tech tackle box. Dad's face lit up. "This is incredible. Son, exactly what I needed." He spent the next 20 minutes showing everyone the tackle box, talking about how a fisherman always needs the best gear. My lure sat on the coffee table. Forgotten. It wasn't about the money. It was about what that moment taught me, my effort, my thought. It just didn't matter as much. I wasn't just second place. I wasn't even in the race. That feeling, that constant low hum of not enoughness, it followed me. It became the soundtrack of my life. In high school, when I started getting into carpentry, my hands rough with calluses, my fingernails caked with sawdust, my dad would just shake his head. "Owen, that's a hobby, not a career. You need to focus on something with a future, something you can build a name on." He didn't see the art. He didn't see the passion. He just saw a kid getting his hands dirty when he should have been studying for an SAT prep course. Caleb, meanwhile, was breezing through his classes, headed for some prestigious business school, a path my parents had carefully curated since the day he was born. He was the legacy. I was just Owen. I carried that with me into college. I majored in architecture, a compromise that was supposed to make everyone happy. It was still creative, but it had a clear-cut corporate path. I worked my tail off, late nights, all-nighters, pushing myself to the absolute limit. I wanted to prove them wrong. I wanted to show them that my hands could do more than just build things out of wood. They could design skyscrapers. But even then, my biggest victory was always met with a quiet shrug. When I landed my first big internship at a top firm, Dad just nodded and said, "Good, you're on track." Caleb just finalized a merger with a startup in Silicon Valley. You know, the goalposts were always moving. The shadow was always there. It was during my last year of school that I met Cora. She was a breath of fresh air, all wild laughter and unapologetic chaos. She saw the real me, the guy who loved the smell of sawdust, the guy who spent weekends building things just for the joy of it. She didn't see a project or a disappointment. She saw me. We fell hard and fast. And for the first time in my life, I felt seen. I felt heard. When I told my parents I was getting married, they were polite. But I could see the disappointment in their eyes. She wasn't from the right kind of family, didn't have the right kind of background. They invited her to dinner, but the entire night felt like an interview. My dad asked a dozen questions about her family, her education, her plans. She answered honestly, without an ounce of pretense. But he wasn't listening. He was just taking notes, checking boxes. The entire time, My brother was on his phone, occasionally chiming in with some brilliant piece of business wisdom that made my dad nod with satisfaction. After that night, my mom called me. "Owen, we just want what's best for you. This, isn't it?" She's not a Wallace. Not really. The name, the family name, that was the only thing that ever mattered to them. They didn't see love. They saw a stain on their perfect tapestry. My relationship with my family became strained. We talked less, visited less. Every conversation was a gentle probe, a quiet attempt to get me back on their track. But I held my ground. I had a different kind of track now. One I was building myself. I thought I was free. I thought I had finally escaped the constant shadow of my brother and the quiet judgment of my parents. I thought I was on the brink of building a new legacy. I was wrong. The cracks were already there, and they were about to give way. Tell me, have you ever felt like you were living in someone else's shadow, the golden child of your family? Comment with a hand-raising emoji if you get what I'm talking about, and stick around. Because that quiet neglect I'd lived with my whole life, it was about to get loud. It was about to become a betrayal so deep, it would leave a scar. And that was just the beginning. Cora and I, we were a team. Or at least, I thought we were. Our life together was a kind of quiet rebellion against my parents' world of sterile perfection. While they were at their country club, we were at flea markets, searching for old wood with stories to tell. While they were calculating profit margins, I was calculating how to turn a cracked old door into a beautiful, rustic table. I loved the feeling of it, the honesty in the work. It felt like I was finally building something that was truly my own, not just what I was told to build. But even that was a kind of sacrifice. The architecture degree sat in a dusty frame on a shelf, a constant, silent reminder of the life I'd given up. I told myself it was worth it, for Cora, for us. When she told me she was pregnant with Finn, my first thought wasn't about the future or my career. It was about how I was going to be the best damn dad I could be. My dad never really saw me. I swore I would see my son, truly see him. So I doubled down on my business, working late into the night, my hands cramping from the endless sanding and sawing. I built Finn's crib myself, each slat a silent prayer for his health, each joint a testament to my love. It was more than a piece of furniture. It was a promise to Finn and to myself. But the stress started to take its toll. The late nights, the constant hustle. The money wasn't coming in fast enough. My architectural clients, they paid well. But my passion projects, the ones that fed my soul, they were a slow burn. The bills started piling up. The envelopes from the bank with that ominous red stripe on them. I tried to talk to Cora about it, but she'd just wave it off. "Don't worry, Owen. Everything will be fine. I'll take care of it." She was a whirlwind of energy, always on the move, always with a new idea. I loved that about her, but I was also starting to get a nagging feeling in my gut. Something wasn't right. I'd come home to find new clothes in the closet, an expensive new gadget on the counter, and when I'd ask, she'd just say a friend loaned it to her, or that she got a good deal. I didn't want to be a nag, so I just let it slide. I should have paid closer attention. The week before Finn was born, things got really tense. We were short on the mortgage payment. I was panicked. I called my parents, hoping, foolishly, for some help. Just a loan. Just a little grace. The call went to voicemail. I tried again. No answer. I knew they were busy. It was the week of Caleb's big promotion party at their summer house. A huge celebration. A weekend of toasts and congratulatory speeches. My parents had called me the week before, inviting us, but I'd told them Finn was due any day. My mom's voice had been a little strained. "Oh, darling, are you sure it's a very important event for Caleb? You should be here to support your brother." I told her my place was with Cora, and she didn't argue. But I felt the distance grow wider between us. A few days later, my dad texted me a picture of Caleb shaking hands with some CEO, with the caption, "Legacy in the making. Proud of my son." The message was clear. I was on my own. The day before the party, a registered letter arrived. A notice from the bank. Final warning before foreclosure. Panic set in. Cora, she was still so calm. Too calm. "Just relax. Owen, we'll figure it out. I'll handle it," she said, before getting in her car and speeding off. She didn't come back for 2 days. When she finally did, she had an envelope full of cash. I was so relieved, so grateful. I didn't even ask where she got it from. I didn't want to know. It was enough that she had fixed it. Or so I thought. A few days later, Finn was born. He was perfect. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, and a scream that filled the entire hospital room. The moment I held him, the world shifted. My past, my parents, my brother, my career, all of it faded away. There was only Finn. I was so exhausted, so filled with a kind of love I didn't even know was possible. I barely slept. I was in a blissful, sleep-deprived daze for the first 2 weeks. Cora seemed different, too. She was quiet, distant. She spent hours in the shower. I thought it was just the baby blues, the stress of a new mother. I tried to be there for her, to hold her hand, to tell her everything would be okay. She'd just pull away. One night, I found a small vial in her purse, a few pills left inside. I didn't recognize them. I asked her about it. Gently. She just snapped at me. "It's nothing. You're making a big deal out of nothing. Owen, just leave me alone." It wasn't her voice. It was hard and cold. I backed off, scared to push her, scared of what I might find. The tension in the house was a living thing, a low hum that kept me on edge. I started to notice how she'd flinch when the phone rang, how she'd look over her shoulder when she was talking to someone on the street. I was scared for her. I was scared for my son. I thought I was losing her, that the pressure of motherhood was too much. But I was so wrong. I was so unbelievably blind. I remember thinking to myself, this is my life now. A beautiful son, a wife who's struggling, and a family that wants nothing to do with us. I'll have to handle it all myself. I didn't know that the biggest betrayal was yet to come, and it was lurking right there, in the quiet, in the empty spaces between us. I was about to learn that while my family's neglect was a slow poison, Cora's was a swift and brutal knife, and it was waiting for me. Just waiting. My phone lay on the counter, the silence louder than any dial tone. My parents' words echoed in my head, a familiar chorus of disappointment and disdain. "Don't come looking for help." It was a line I'd heard my whole life, but it had never carried this much weight. Not with a newborn crying in the next room, with a mortgage payment due and a wife who was, well, I didn't even know what Cora was anymore. The trust I had in her, in the life we were building. It was starting to feel like a house of cards in a hurricane. I'd given up everything for this, and it was all crumbling around me. I tried calling Cora again and again, but the calls just went to voicemail. I kept replaying our last conversation, her too calm voice saying, "I'll handle it." I didn't know then that she had a whole different kind of plan. I was so caught up in the stress of being a new dad, of feeling like a failure, that I missed the signs, the hushed phone calls, the quick trips out, the distant look in her eyes. I just assumed she was tired. I thought she was struggling with the baby blues, like so many new moms do. I thought she was just trying to protect me. I was so wrong. 2 nights after Finn was born, I was holding him, trying to get him to sleep. He was crying, A small, helpless sound that cut right to my soul. I was exhausted, but a weird sense of peace settled over me. This was it. This was my life now. Just me and this tiny little person, figuring it out together. I remember looking down at him and thinking, they might not want you, Finn, but I do. More than anything, I was determined to be the kind of dad I never had. A dad who showed up. A dad who didn't just talk about love, but lived it. I felt this rush of fierce, protective love that gave me the strength to get through anything. That's when the front door opened, and Cora walked in. She looked different. Her hair was pulled back. Her eyes were red-rimmed and her face was pale, almost gray. She didn't look at me or Finn. She just walked past me, into the bedroom. I followed her in, holding Finn close, and found her standing in front of the dresser, her hands shaking as she shoved clothes into a duffel bag. "Cora," I asked, my voice barely a whisper. "What are you doing?" She didn't answer, just kept moving, frantic, like she was being chased by something. I put Finn down in his crib and walked over to her, putting my hand on her shoulder. Her body went stiff. "Cora, please, talk to me. We can fix this. Whatever it is, we can fix it." That's when she turned, and for the first time, I saw it. The pure, unadulterated fear in her eyes. She pulled away from me, clutching the duffel bag to her chest. "You don't understand, Owen," she said, her voice raw. "You never understood." And then she said the one thing that still haunts me to this day. "I was never like you. I didn't have a safety net." She took a step back, her eyes darting to the window, to the door, anywhere but at me. I had to make my own way, and I messed up. I messed up bad. A cold dread settled over me. The money, the pills, the quiet whispers. It all came crashing down at once. I grabbed her arm. "What did you do? Cora, just tell me." But she didn't answer. She just looked at me. A flicker of something in her eyes. Not fear anymore. Something else. Something I didn't recognize. She pulled her arm out of my grasp and ran out of the room, out of the house, and into the dark night. I stood there, frozen. I wanted to run after her, but I couldn't. Finn was crying now, his small, helpless wails piercing the silence. I was a single dad with a newborn, and I was all alone. The next day, the phone rang. It was my brother, Caleb. I was surprised. He never called me. I thought maybe, just maybe, he was calling to offer some help, to tell me that my parents had been wrong. But he didn't. His voice was casual, almost dismissive. "Hey man, heard about Cora. Look, I'm sorry, but Mom and Dad are just... they're really worried about their reputation. You know how it is. It's not personal. You made your bed. I could hear the party in the background. The music. The laughter. It was like I was listening to the world moving on without me." I hung up the phone without a word. I felt a flash of white-hot rage, so intense it made me dizzy. My parents' legacy, their perfect life, it was all that mattered. My brother's promotion, my parents' reputation, it was all a game to them, and I was just a pawn they could discard when I no longer served their purpose. I looked at Finn, sleeping peacefully in his crib, a tiny, perfect little human who had no idea his entire world had just been torn apart. And I made a decision. I wouldn't just survive. I would thrive. I would build a life so strong, so beautiful, that my parents would look at it and realize they had made the biggest mistake of their lives. I would not just survive, I would win. But I didn't know then that the real fight was just beginning. It was a fight I had to win for Finn. I didn't know that the biggest challenge wasn't just surviving. It was healing from the betrayal and finding a way to forgive myself for not seeing it sooner. After I hung up on Caleb, I felt this strange, hollowed out kind of calm. The rage was gone, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. I was all Finn had. My parents and brother had made it clear where I stood. I was the one who went off script, the one who didn't fit into their spreadsheet of success. I was the cautionary tale, and I had a choice: become that story, or write a new one. The first few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights and sheer panic. I was in over my head. I didn't know how to change a diaper without making a mess. I burned the formula. I was so exhausted I started to see double. One night, Finn was screaming, and I just couldn't soothe him. I held him, rocking him back and forth, tears streaming down my face. I felt like the biggest failure in the world, that I was ready to give up. I thought about calling my mom, about begging for help, about giving them exactly what they wanted, proof that I couldn't handle it. But something in me just wouldn't. The thought of letting them win, of proving their cold judgment right, filled me with a fresh surge of fight. I put Finn down in his crib, walked to the bathroom, and stared at my reflection. I looked like a ghost. My eyes were bloodshot. My face was pale, and I had a week's worth of stubble on my chin. I splashed cold water on my face, took a deep breath, and walked back to the nursery. This was my life now. I had to learn to swim. That's when I heard it. A knock on the front door. It was late. Past midnight. I froze. Who would be at my door this late? I grabbed a baseball bat from the hall closet, my heart pounding in my chest. I opened the door a crack, and there he was. My neighbor, Gus. He was a small, wiry old man with a face like a roadmap of a hard life. He was the kind of guy who kept to himself. We'd nodded to each other a few times, but that was it. He was wearing a faded flannel shirt and a pair of worn-out jeans. He was holding a coffee mug in his hand. "Your little guy's got a set of lungs on him," he said, his voice a low, gravelly rumble. He took a sip from his mug. "Sounds like he's trying to wake the dead." I just stood there, speechless. He took another sip and looked me dead in the eye. "You're burning daylight. Kid, move." And with that, he walked right past me, into the house. He walked into the nursery and looked at Finn, who was still wailing. "You gotta feed the furnace," he said, picking up a bottle from the counter. He took a pocket knife from his jeans and unscrewed the cap of the formula with a practiced hand. "First things first. You ration the powder. You clock your feeds. You nap when he naps. Don't waste your breath on speeches. Just move." He was like a drill sergeant, but with kindness in his eyes. He handed me the bottle. My hands were shaking. He noticed. He took the bottle from me and held it up. "You gotta have a steady hand," he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a worn-out old coffee mug. The ceramic cracked and chipped. On the side, someone had written, "Steady hand," in faded black ink. "This got me through the worst of it," he said, handing it to me. "Keep it." We sat at my kitchen table, with a piece of junk mail spread out between us. He helped me make a plan: feed times, diaper runs, a list of places hiring for night shifts. He circled 3 of them and underlined a note: "Show up clean." Gus, this total stranger, had seen my pain, my struggle, and he had come to help. He wasn't my family, but he was more of a father to me in that moment than my own had ever been. A few days later, I was back on my feet, going to job interviews with Finn strapped to my chest. I didn't beg, I didn't whine. I just told them I was a single dad looking for a chance. I got turned down a dozen times, but I kept going. I had Finn to think about. I had to make it work. One afternoon, I was at a salvage yard, looking for some old wood for a project I was working on. I was trying to make a few bucks to get us by. My phone buzzed in my pocket. It was a text from an unknown number. Hey, you're the guy with the kid, right, the one on the bus. Your hands look steady. We're looking for someone to help with a real estate renovation project. You interested? I stared at the text, my heart pounding in my chest. I didn't know who it was. I was suspicious, but I was also out of options. I texted back, I'm short on options. She replied with one word, good. We have a lot in common. The next day, I met her. Her name was Sophia, and she owned a real estate company that specialized in buying and flipping old, rundown homes. She saw something in me that no one else did. She didn't see a failure. She didn't see a single dad with a newborn. She saw a craftsman. She saw a man who knew how to build something beautiful out of broken things. And she was about to give me the biggest chance of my life. I had no idea that my dad abandoned me, a single dad with a newborn, only to put me on the path to finding a new family. Sophia's text was the lifeline I didn't know I needed. We met the next day at a rundown bungalow. The kind of place that needed more than a coat of paint, it needed a new soul. She walked me through the house, pointing out the peeling wallpaper and the broken floorboards. This place is a mess, she said, a smile on her face. But I think you're the man to fix it. I looked at her, and for the first time in a long time, I felt seen. She didn't see the tired, single dad. She saw the carpenter, the artist. We talked for hours, not just about the house, but about our lives, our dreams. We talked about building things, not just from wood, but from scratch. We talked about hope. I started working with her that week. I'd drop Finn off at Gus's house, and then I'd head to the job site. Gus. He never asked for a thing. He just took Finn in, fed him, changed him, and put him down for his naps. One day, I came to pick Finn up, and I found Gus sitting in his rocking chair, holding Finn, singing a lullaby in a low, gravelly voice. Finn was sound asleep, a small, peaceful smile on his face. I felt a lump form in my throat. I was so used to being alone, to having to do everything myself. But now, I had Gus. I had Sophia. I had a new family, a new purpose. Working with Sophia was a revelation. She was a force of nature, a woman who knew what she wanted and wasn't afraid to go after it. We were a team, a dynamic duo. She'd find the houses, the broken pieces, and I'd put them back together. We'd spend hours talking about our projects, our ideas, our dreams. We'd talk about the perfect finish for a countertop, the best way to open up a room. We were building something more than just homes. We were building a partnership, a bond, a friendship that was deeper than anything I'd ever known. And in the quiet moments, when we'd sit on the floor of an empty house, surrounded by sawdust and possibility, I'd catch her looking at me, and I'd feel a spark, a flicker of something more. My life was finally starting to feel like my own again. I was earning good money. I was spending my days doing what I loved, and I was raising my son. Finn was a happy baby. He'd gurgle and coo when I came to pick him up from Gus's house, his eyes lighting up when he saw me. He was my purpose. He was my reason. I was so busy building our new life, I didn't even notice the storm clouds on the horizon. One day, I got a call from my mom. It was a couple months after Finn was born. I almost didn't answer. I didn't know what to say to her. What do you say to the person who you thought you could count on, who turned their back on you when you needed them most? I answered the phone, and her voice, it was tight and strained. Owen, she said, your father and I, we're very worried about you. You're living like this. You're not living up to your potential. The words hit me like a physical blow. I could almost hear the disappointment in her voice. We've been talking, and we think you should come home. You can live in the guest house. We can help you with Finn. You're a Wallace. Owen, you belong with us. I was shocked. After all this time, after all the things they said, They were offering me a way back in. But I knew what the price was. It wasn't just a place to stay. It was my freedom. It was my happiness. It was my future. I told her no. The word felt like a physical weight on my tongue. "Mom," I said, "I appreciate the offer, but my life is here. I have a job. I have a son. I have a family." The word felt strange in my mouth. A family. I meant Gus. I meant Sophia. I meant my son, Finn. She went silent for a moment. I could hear her breathing on the other end of the line. "Owen," she said, her voice a little colder now. "Don't be foolish. This life you're building, it's not real. It's a fantasy. You're in over your head. You're a single dad with a newborn. You need us. But I didn't need them." I hung up the phone. I knew that was the end of it. At least for a while. I went to Gus's house to pick up Finn, and I told him what happened. I expected him to be surprised, but he just nodded, a knowing look in his eyes. He poured 2 cups of coffee, one for me, and one for himself. We sat on his front porch, watching the world go by. "Family ain't blood, he said, his voice a low rumble. "Family is the people who show up." His words resonated with me in a way I hadn't felt since I was a child. He was right. My family had been my biggest fear, my biggest disappointment. But now, I had a new family. A family of my own. A family that had chosen me. A few months later, the HOA sent me a letter. It was a formal complaint about the condition of my lawn. It was a small, petty thing. I just laughed. I'd been so busy building my business and raising my son, I hadn't even noticed my lawn was a little overgrown. I just figured I'd take care of it when I had the time. But the next day, another letter arrived. And another. And another. It was clear that someone was targeting me. My house was a small, humble place. But it was mine. It was my home. And I wasn't about to let some petty HOA lady take it from me. I was ready for a fight. I wasn't going to back down. My family had taught me that the only way to win was to stand your ground. And I was ready to do just that. As I held Finn, his little body warm and safe in my arms, I felt a strength I hadn't felt before. I had lost my wife, my family, and my home was in jeopardy. But I had a son who looked at me with unconditional love. A mentor who had taught me what it meant to be a man, and a partner who saw my worth. I was no longer the boy who was desperate for his father's approval. I was a man, a father, a builder, and I was ready for a fight. I had no idea that my dad abandoned me. A single dad with a newborn, and in doing so, he taught me to be the kind of man he never was. I was ready to win. Not for them, but for me. And for Finn. We fought our battle with the HOA, and we won. It wasn't a landslide victory. It was a quiet, firm stand. The final notice from the HOA was crumpled in my hand, a relic of a war that had been fought and won. I didn't frame it. I didn't need to. The satisfaction was enough. The victory wasn't for me. It was for Gus. It was for the old man who had looked at me, a total stranger, and seen a man, not a failure. It was for Finn, my son, my reason for fighting. I had to show him that we don't back down. We stand our ground. A few weeks later, my mom called. She said she and my father were in town, and they wanted to see Finn. I didn't hesitate. I said no. My parents didn't argue. They just said they'd wait. And I knew they would. They were patient. They were persistent. They were like a slow-moving glacier, determined to wear you down until you gave in. But I wasn't a glacier. I was a mountain. And I wasn't going to move. One afternoon, I came home from work to find them sitting on my porch swing. a basket of pastries on the ground beside them. They looked so out of place, so uncomfortable. My mom's perfect hair, my dad's stiff suit. It was like they were a couple of actors who had wandered onto the wrong set. My dad stood up, a tight smile on his face. "Owen," he said, his voice a little too loud. "We just want to talk. We want to be a part of Finn's life." I looked at them, and I saw a glimmer of something I hadn't seen before. Fear. They were scared. Not of me, but of losing control. Of losing their reputation. Of having their perfect little world crumble around them. They thought they could just show up, with a basket of pastries and a few hollow words, and everything would be okay. But it wasn't. It couldn't be. I looked at my son, who was playing in the grass, his little face covered in dirt. I looked at Gus, who was watching from his porch, a silent sentinel. I looked at my home, the home I had built with my own 2 hands, the home I had fought for. I had everything I had ever wanted, a family, a home, a purpose. I didn't need them anymore. "You had your chance," I said, my voice low and steady. "You chose your reputation. You chose your legacy. I chose my son." I walked past them, into the house, and I didn't look back. I wasn't angry anymore. The rage was gone, replaced by a deep, quiet sense of peace. I had faced my biggest fear, and I had won. I had stared into the face of my past, and I had walked away. I had no idea that my dad abandoned me, a single dad with a newborn. And in doing so, he taught me to be the man he never was. I had no idea that the boy who was desperate for his father's approval would become a man who was so proud of himself. I had no idea that the boy who was always second place would win the race of a lifetime. My story isn't about triumph. It's not about revenge. It's about a man who lost everything and found himself. It's about a boy who was abandoned and a man who chose to build his own family. It's about a man who was told he wasn't enough and a man who proved them all wrong. If you've ever felt like you were living in someone else's shadow, if you've ever been told you weren't good enough, if you've ever had to build your own family from the ground up, then this is for you. Hit that like button if you believe that family isn't just about blood. It's about who shows up. Comment with the one person who has been your rock, your Gus, in your life. And if you want to see how I built my own carpentry business from scratch and how I'm raising my son to be a man who is proud of who he is, then hit that subscribe button. It's more than just a story. It's a blueprint for a better life.